You know, Fred was actually just like a taller kid, you know, because he's, and he kind of still is. I mean, he's got an enthusiasm and an energy that, you know, that kind of permeates everything he does. Because, you know, even today, it's 20 years later, but, you know, he's enthusiastic about what he has a passion for, and that's films and working with people.
I always got the feeling he was one of the kids at different times. So it was very easy for him to communicate to them because it was as if he was there.
He had a real tap into what young people would enjoy about this film, but also he was an adult, of course, so he crossed that bridge into the adulthood, and that's part of the reason why I think the film is still so successful today.
My dad was a big film buff, and he would take me to the drive-in. You know, I'd get in my pajamas and be in a sleeping bag in the back of the station wagon at the drive-in watching, you know, movies that are now favorites of mine, The Sand Pebbles and Planet of the Apes and stuff from the late 60s when I was a little kid. And I was always attracted to genre movies. I was a bit of a nerd as a kid, you know, I wasn't real athletic. So I gravitated towards movies about the fantastic and misfits and things that were sort of larger than life. I applied to USC Film School, which was then and now considered one of the best film schools in the country, and I also applied to UCLA, and both schools, film schools rejected me. So I decided, well, but both schools accepted me in their curriculum, so I just couldn't necessarily be in the film department. So I thought the girls were cuter at UCLA, and I liked the campus better. So I went to UCLA as an English major, but continued to make movies, and UCLA at that time was brimming with a lot of actors and writers and directors, and it was a really fertile time. So the fact that I was an English major was just kind of a nuisance to what I really wanted to do, was hang with my friends and make movies. Well, I desperately wanted to direct, and I thought, well, what's simple, what's cheap? What do I have access to, which is what we always think about for a low-budget movie. And my parents owned a Victorian house up in Marin County. I said, okay, well, I can shoot at the house. How about the movie's about a guy in a house, and at the beginning of the movie, he goes into the house, and at the end of the movie, he comes out of the house, and in between is, you know, 85 minutes of the scariest shit I can possibly concoct. And I thought, and the movie will be called House. And I never sat down and write it. I had the idea, but other things were distracting me. And a friend of mine, Ethan Wiley, who was my college roommate, said, let me take a crack at that House script. And he wrote the screenplay. It was a little more goofy and comedic than the version that I had envisioned, the sort of black and white, edgy kind of scary movie. But his movie was a lot of fun, and I was hired by Steve Miner to write a movie and a script, and that was my first professional job. And Steve read this thing that we'd come up with, House, and he loved it, and he made the movie. Sean Cunningham produced it, and William Katz starred in it, and that was my first screen credit. One night I just thought, you know, what kind of movie could I make that has sort of all the stuff that I love from B movies? You know, it's got to have cute girls in it. It's got to have, you know, some aliens from space. It's got to have a, you know, two-fisted tough guy with, you know, wisecracking and smoking cigarettes. And I sort of just took all of these disparate elements from B movies and just sort of dropped them in a blender and, you know, hit puree. And that was the script for Creeps, which I wrote in about 2 weeks. The financing for Creeps came out of the fact that I was kind of full of myself at that time, and because the script had only taken me 2 weeks to write, I figured, well, I got not a whole lot to lose here, so I said to my agent, you know, I want to be attached to direct this, and he sent it out, and in pretty short order, we had interest from a major studio, which was TriStar. The picture did not get a wide release, and it was sort of appreciated in the regions that it did show, but it was a little bit of a disappointment. However, you're never hotter than before your movie is released. So The Monster Squad was actually conceived and the screenplay was written before Night of the Creeps was released. So there was a kind of a momentum to my career at that time. Nobody had seen Creeps yet. It had yet to reach the small audience that it initially received. So we went right from one end to the other. In fact, if you watch Night of the Creeps, there is a scene in which a key character meets his demise in a restroom at a college. And if you look very carefully on the wall of the restroom, you can see it says "Go Monster Squad." I had always loved the classic Universal monster pictures as a kid, and had stayed up late night creature features to watch them. And at the same time, I was a big fan of all of the classic comedians of the 30s and 40s. I loved the Little Rascals, obviously, and Abbott and Costello were kind of my favorites at that time. And so when I discovered Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, that was like the holy grail as a kid to me. And so it just occurred to me, you know, what if we did a Little Rascals movie in which they meet the Universal monsters? And one of my best friends at the time was a college chum named Shane Black, and he knew Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I said, Shane, let's do the Little Rascals Meet the Universal monsters. And he goes, cool, let's do it. And the other thing that was kind of amusing about Shane writing his first screenplay was his imagination is immense, and there's always tremendous scope to the stuff he comes up with. So the first draft of the Monster Squad, whereas in the final movie it's one vampire bride and Van Helsing and 3 or 4 assistants, you know, he had Van Helsing coming in on a Zeppelin with machine guns and, you know, 40 vampire brides riding horses. And I said, man, we can't make this. This is the first 5 minutes of the movie, and we already spent, you know, $100 million. He goes, oh, but it's going to work. It's going to be great. So obviously this was going to be a step up in terms of scope and in terms of price and all that. But I didn't think about that so much. As I say, there was a certain momentum to my career, and the script was what it was, and the key was to find somebody who loved it. And I had been a huge fan of Peter Hyams, the writer-director. I loved his films Capricorn 1 and Hanover Street and Busting and Our Time. All of his early films I was crazy about. And I had met him, and we had developed a relationship through his partner, Jonathan Zimbert.
I first heard about the Monster Squad from Fred Decker, because Fred and I were friends. There was a script he had written which I had read probably a year or so before I read the Monster Squad script. And I just loved the writing of the script, and I met with him, and then Peter and I met with him, and we just knew this was someone to pay attention to. And then he told me about a script that he and this other guy, who had never heard of, by the name of Shane Black, was working on together. And then Fred gave us the script. We loved it, and we had a relationship with an executive at Taft Barish by the name of Eileen Maisel, and we gave it to Eileen. She loved it. She showed it to Rob Cohen.
Rob Cohen, who's now a director, was sort of the vice president, and he really liked the script a lot, and he also apparently responded to Night of the Creeps and found it stylish, and he was sort of the first one to say, you know, let's take a shot with this.
It was one of those serendipitous things where the people that could say yes did say yes quickly, and we got it, and we were moving towards production within days.
Well, clearly the inspiration for this movie is the Universal monster rallies of the 40s. And we went to Universal with the project, and they passed on it, I guess not yet appreciating the value of the library that they had and these characters that they had. So we had to figure out a way to have these characters in the movie without stepping on copyrighted images that Universal had created.
The challenge became, how do we create these monsters so that they are unique, that it's Frankenstein, but the design can't look exactly like the Universal design. So it took some time, and that was, one of the many contributions of Stan Winston was not only the creation of the makeup and the monsters, but also the design too, so it was clear who they were, and also kept us all out of court.
So we started with sketches. He said, here's how I see the Wolfman, here's how I see the creature, and eventually pretty quickly we agreed on an approach, and I deferred to him a lot because I was in awe.
We were all excited about it from the very beginning because at the time the talk was that it was going to be a chance to redo the old Universal monsters, not reinvent them, literally to redo them. Ultimately what happened was the decision came through that we had to change them. The licensing didn't come through from Universal for whatever reason, and we had to change them. And in the end it was probably a better thing because then there's a new take on the monsters.
And if you look at our picture, the Wolfman is much more lupine, much more of a wolf than Chaney Jr. Frankenstein's monster, we had a little bit more liberty there as long as there were some scars and some bolts that would tell the story. And we were really lucky because Stan Winston is a film buff himself, and he took it as a real challenge, to recreate these characters.
In producing all of the other monsters, Stan sort of broke them down to various members of the crew, and I ended up doing the prosthetic makeup work for the Frankenstein monster.
Tus trailers. Visita mi
The only
canal.
thing we had to avoid was anything that was specifically Universal monster territory. So on the Frankenstein monster, instead of putting electrodes on his neck, we put them up here on his temple because we knew that we wanted to have a source of getting electricity into the character. We stayed away from the greens that were prevalent in color artwork of the Frankenstein monster. And my original paint job on it was much more ghastly, and I was literally looking at kind of forensic type photographs to get that feeling of a real dead person. And I remember that the test that we went on set at the first time, Peter Hyams, producer, came over and looked at it, and he hated it. He told me, he said, it's horrible. He said, this looks something like I would find down on Hollywood Boulevard in a mask shop. And I was just completely devastated because it was such an early film, I worked on at the time. And I remember telling Stan, and he said, don't worry about it, we'll work it out. And Stan ended up working out the colors with me later and sort of got them tuned up the right way.
Master is near. Master wants children dead.
I spent more time with the makeup people than I did with the kids, and Stan Winston's a real character. He's this little, I wouldn't say mean, but can be very mean little guy. And I made the choice when I did the movie to not really talk to anybody for a while, just to get a feel, because Frankenstein doesn't talk much, and that pissed him off. He didn't like that, and he would do all kinds of stuff to mess with me. Like, I remember once doing the makeup, he glued my eyes shut. He glued my hands to the chair. But after a while, his being mean to me made me feel somewhat like he was parental, and I would start to call him Dada and follow him around on the set, which he hated, because he's little and I was huge. As far as prosthetics go, for me as an actor, anything you put in the way of me getting what I want is good for me. You transform, and like they built up my body, so I look like I have muscles, and I look like I have a bigger neck, and I even, I wear a prosthesis in my mouth, so my voice is different. So you become somebody else without really having to work at it, which is what you want to do when you're acting.
Focus. Focus.
The only funny thing happened was that they made 23 appliances, I think, but we did 24 days, something like, there were not enough appliances because we shot one day too many. And the day went really long. It was the last day of the shoot, and they didn't have anything made. And you have to cure the foam rubber, otherwise it doesn't work. You have to make it, and that's... So I volunteered to wear the makeup home. So they took the wig off, and I drove home in my car. And without the wig on and the other stuff, I look even weirder, because they took off, you know, the makeup on top of the rubber. And when I came back in the next day, we shot the whole day, but when they took the makeup off at the end of the day, the gentle pressure of the glue and the foam pulling actually pulled the top layer of my skin off my cheeks. So when you took the makeup off, I had these huge blisters that drooped. They were nothing. It was like having a sunburn. It was just, you know, but it was really, Stan was scared. He really thought he had injured me.
I must sleep soon, so listen very carefully.
I remember the prosthetics, and they're very challenging. They always are. The other thing was dealing with the contact lenses. I had very sensitive eyes, and we now have better contact lenses to use in film, so I don't have that problem anymore. But I remember working with Stan Winston, who's a dear old friend, and I wouldn't let anybody else touch me except Stan, because if I even put my own finger up to my eye, I make myself cry. I wanted the costume to have the traditional aspects to it. You know, we had Bela Lugosi's ring for that. You know, exactly the same ring. And, you know, I'm a tall person, so that long cape works with it. You can sort of play with that and use it. And it was a lot of fun.
Well, I'll go have a bite. Will you change into something more comfortable?
I think probably the most challenging character in terms of successfully pulling off a makeup on the character was probably the Wolfman. I think because it's a difficult thing to do if it goes too far into the wolf area. It's so animal, so bestial that it's hard to get any kind of expression or emotion out of it. And if you pull back too much, you certainly don't want to do it as pulled back as what they did on Lon Chaney, you know, back in the 40s as the original Wolfman. It was a cool thing for its time, but it just didn't seem to go far enough. So you're trying to find that kind of midpoint that serves both ends.
ABC common worker!
I had never done any suit performance and any creature work before, and had always wanted to, but was kind of, you know, a little reluctant to jump in and say, I want to do this. And on Monster Squad, I remember going to Stan and asking, you know, nobody's cast the creature yet. Is there any chance that I could play this thing? And he thought about it, and he said, well, I'll get back to you. And he came back and said, yeah, we'll try it. We'll see if we can make it work. And he was behind it, and got Fred Decker behind it, because I had no experience doing this kind of stuff, you know, and they both were willing to take a chance on it. So you know, from there on out, it worked out great, because I was absolutely thrilled to play this role.
The original Creature from the Black Lagoon was my favorite monster of all time. And I got a call from Matt saying, hey, why don't you come in, Stan wants to see your portfolio, talking about giving us the Gill Man. And so I was really excited. And then we were like on cloud 9, you know, like, wow, we're gonna build the Gill Man. So then we just kind of took it upon ourselves to try to figure out how to build a suit.
Well, for the Gill Man, the thing that we did that I thought was very novel at the time, because I had not heard of anybody doing, was to take my body cast and shave it down, and then do the sculpture and the molding and casting the rubber. So the final rubber suit to go back onto my body would have to be stretched really tight, and that would eliminate a lot of the wrinkling and sagging of suits around the joints, around elbows and armpits and all that sort of thing.
Of course, Tom's like 6'4", he's slender. So we had to take sort of Stan's basic design and adjust it. And I remember at one point being a big fan of the original Gill Man, and I'm a huge fan of Hua Chang and Chris Miller Jr. and how their architectural style of sculpture. When we were actually doing the suit, I remember Matt was sculpting the head, and I would suggest little things like, hey, when we flare these gills out, let's do it more sort of architecturally and do, you know, more like, has a slight 50s flair to it. So we added those little touches to it, and then the scale patterns too. We sort of fleshed that out a little bit more.
And then the head was totally an animatronic mask that I would wear. And the only vision I had was right in the corner, the tear duct area of the Gill Man's larger eyes. But again, the eyes, because they were articulated eyes, were probably sitting out, you know, maybe 3/4 to an inch away from my face. So now you have the phenomenon of like trying to look through a keyhole that's pushed away from your eye. So honestly, my vision was very, very limited. But when I was in the suit, We glued down the neck, we glued down at the wrists and at the ankles because we wanted a totally seamless look to it. And once I went in, I stayed glued into the suit. And it's something I don't do today because I know it's certainly not a healthy way to spend the day, but one of those days I was in for 13 hours, starting first thing in the morning till late at night. And when they didn't need me for a few hours, I'd go off to the dressing room and I'd lay down for a while, but I wasn't eating any food. I wasn't drinking anything because there was no way to use a bathroom because the suit was, totally seamless. And physically, I mean, at my age back then, 20 years ago, it was not that big of an ordeal. But I do remember by the end of the day, I was just totally exhausted and just ready to get out of the suit.
One of the greatest things, I don't know if you might have seen it coming, but he was a big foam latex sponge dipped in water. So when he came out, he could barely lift himself, and there were like 100 sprinklers coming out of every joint. Remember that?
The part that was tricky was just being in the water. We were shooting at night, and the water, they had warmed up this pond on the back lot at Warner Brothers. And when you're out in the cold air and then you climb into warm water, the first thing you feel like you need to do is use the bathroom. And this is one of those days when I'd been glued into the suit all day. Luckily, I wasn't taking on a lot of fluids, so it wasn't too bad of a problem. But otherwise, it could have been a disaster. Physically, the most challenging scene was the fight between the Gillman and the Rangers that when he comes out of the manhole on the street, because we had set it up with the stunt coordinator who completely understood, wasn't happy that I didn't have any vision, but completely understood and worked it out. He said, then you know what we'll do? I'm going to give you moves and we're going to count it out. So, on the count of 1, your hand's up here, and the count of 2, your other hand's down here. We worked out these moves, and what the other stuntmen would do is basically, they knew what my count was. So on the count of 1, somebody had to have a rubber billy club up there. On the count of 2, another billy club under there.
There were some stuntmen that we'd worked with before on Invaders from Mars, at least one in particular I remember, where they were very enthusiastic. It was like that fight with all the deputies, and they had these, their billy clubs, they were made out of polyfoam, but they had metal in them still, like soft metal. And they were wailing on Tom, really hitting him, because they were stunt guys. And Tom was saying, you could kind of hear him in this big mouth going, hey guys, not so hard. I mean, it's really hitting him. He was doing good.
But I do know that by the time we got into the 3rd and 4th take, and we're starting to miss our numbers, I'm getting shots in the gut with these rubber batons and stuff.
And so Tom was just fighting. He was going through the moves, and this one point he's supposed to swing, and one deputy was supposed to duck, and he didn't. And Tom just had this full-on swing, strike Steve, and hit him right on his shield, his hat. The guy just went cross-eyed and fell right down. This is right in front of me. And so he's just sitting, it's a stunt guy. He's sitting there, and they pull his hat off, and I guess the rivets that held the shield had made 2 perfect holes in his forehead that squirted blood about 4 feet, about a yard away, right in front of me, and I just about passed out from that.
I got to do the gunshot when Fat Kid, when Horace, unloads the shotgun, because they did want to do a stuntman, and I said, oh, come on, I can do this, and I think the reason they said yes was because we were pretty much at the end of the shoot for the creature, so they didn't have a lot to lose. So I got to do the whole thing. I got the harness and the jerk cable on the back, and I got the squibs on the front and all that stuff, and blown back into a mattress, and honestly, it was just great fun.
It opened my eyes to sort of the process. It made me realize what our role in makeup effects is, and that is, we have to be innovators and not imitators. And because we went through and without knowing what we were doing, we had to sort of innovate a new way of doing things.
We all loved it because it just nailed all of the Universal monster stuff. And later to hear him say, to hear Fred say that how Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was such an important movie to him as a kid, that he was sort of bringing that whole vibe into this movie. I just absolutely, you know, agree with it, because that was such a cool movie. You took, at the time, you took, you know, the top line monster movies, and you threw them into this really silly story with these, you know, comedic actors. It was a great mix, and that's what this movie is. It's taking cool monsters, mixing it with this kind of adventure kid story, and making it all work.